What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. And today's video is all about Kevin Holland and his victory yesterday over Gunnar Nelson. And I just want to say, I think earlier in the week we talked about this matchup, and we were saying that Kevin had his back against the wall, that he needed to pull out a victory, at least this fight or in the next fight. Otherwise, he was potentially on the chopping block. And that would have been a bummer because Kevin Holland is only 32. He's a fan favorite. People like his fight style. It's exciting. He talks. He's funny. And we were hoping this would happen. We were hoping he would pull out the victory. Now, not only did he pull out the victory, but I think there are some very big positives that we can extract from the victory and also one of his post-fight interviews. And I'm going to take it back to before we talk about all this stuff. And then I'm also going to turn over to Justin at the end of the video. Excuse me. And he's going to give a recap of the fight, and he's going to talk about how great Kevin did from a technical standpoint and what he sees in store for Kevin going forward. But what I want to talk about is I think I see some growth in terms of Kevin Holland's mindset, which is very, very encouraging because he is tremendously talented. Remember, he beat Joaquin Buckley back in the day when they fought. He is just an athletic phenom. There was a time where I think he had like 5 wins in one year. He fought 5 times and won all those fights within 1 year. And so he just had all this promise. And then it seems like he's hit a bumpy road as of late. Now, when he was on the Jaxxon Pod, this is of course the episode where he got a lot of slack. The whole 45-70 thing was born and all that stuff. But there was a very interesting tidbit here in terms of his training and his recovery in regards to smoking weed and his day-to-day. And so I want to go back and I want to play this, and then I want to contrast it with something he said in a post-fight interview, which if you're a Kevin Holland fan is something really good to pay attention to, and maybe to give us hope that he's going to really try. I think it sounds like he's going to try and take advantage and capitalize on his potential and really give it his all for the remainder of his career, I believe. So check this out. Let's go back. He's talking about how he likes to smoke weed, and it's a big habit for him, and how much he smokes, which is a crazy amount from the way he describes it. And then listen to what Rampage says to him. Check this out.
That's me. I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. How long you been smoking weed?
My whole life.
Okay, so I started smoking weed when I was 8 years old, and I quit when I was 17. And one of my coaches, Antonio McKee, he done studies and stuff on it. Weed keeps you from recovering much. Cause,
For real?
Yeah, 'cause I used to fight 6 times a year.
I believe that.
I used to fight 6 times a year. How old are you?
32.
Yeah, so yeah, when I was fighting in Japan, I used to fight 6 times a year.
How old were you then?
I started fighting with them when I was like 21, 22. And
See, I would fight 6 times a year. I don't fight as many times a year as I do because that's what I'm allowed to do. I fight as many times as a year because that's all they give me. And when I say that's all they give me, don't think I'm not blessed, I'm not happy, and don't think I ain't hearing what you say.
Yeah.
I would fight more. And I do believe you when you say weed slows down the recovery. Yeah. Because the older I've got, the more I realize the higher I am, the less recovered I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to pause it there. And my assumption was, he makes that comment. They kind of agree about the effects of weed, or the negative effects in terms of recovery. But then he said something very interesting in the post-fight interview. I'm not going to play it because it's from the UFC and they're pretty crazy about like giving you a copyright strike if you use any of their content. So I'm not going to play it. But what he said in his post-fight interview, not in the octagon, but after the fact, he said, all right, well, what are you going to go do now? He's like, man, I'm going to go back to the hotel and I'm going to smoke some weed because I haven't smoked in a minute. So it sounds like for the first time in God knows how long, because he said he's been smoking his entire life and that's just part of his regimen, it sounds like he actually took a break for this camp, and he also had a post during this fight camp saying he needs to step it up or do something. He needs to dial it in more. And it sounds like he's done that this time, which is so promising because it means that he probably took this camp extra seriously. And there are the results. It went out and showed that he was able to pull off a victory. Not only that, he made the comment that his grappling is good at 170. At 185, he gets overpowered. So I hope for a couple of things. I hope, number one, this is a new beginning for Kevin Holland, where he's going to approach training in a new way, in a different way, maybe to add on to his repertoire. And it's not saying he's already a very good fighter. I think people really underestimate him. He is a good fighter. He's a great fighter with a lot of potential and a lot of athletic ability. But now perhaps he's going to cut back on the weed, which maybe has been affecting his recovery, maybe he'll take more interesting approaches in terms of his preparation for particular opponents, because he said too on the Jaxxon pod, he's like, no, I don't prepare any differently for anybody. I just go in and do my thing and whatever. He's like, all that stuff is nonsense, whatever. I don't think it's nonsense. I think it makes sense to game plan. We see all the top athletes in the UFC, namely John Jones, but a lot of all fighters create very specific game plans for their opponents, which makes sense. So maybe now Kevin Holland is going to start experimenting with some of these new tactics and new methodologies to really up his game. And it's cool because I think as fans of the UFC, no matter who you are, you want to see Kevin Holland do well, because he's one of those guys that is exciting to watch. He has a fun fight style. He does talk a big game, and all of that makes it cool. So it's really, really great. I think that he got this victory, but moreover, that he got this victory by doing something different, because I think that's going to encourage him and inspire him to do more, to try more things out, and to be more creative, to be more creative in his approach to the game, which hopefully will lead to even better and better results. So anyways, that's what I wanted to share. I'm going to turn it over to Justin now to give a bit more technical analysis, and he's going to talk about where he thinks this will take Kevin Holland through the rest of his career.
Enjoying this beautiful day in Florida, but we got to talk about what happened last night. Kevin Holland versus Gunnar Nelson, man. Gunnar Nelson being in the UFC since 2012, with a record going into the fight with 10 wins and 5 losses. Going up against, Kevin Holland, one of my favorite gatekeepers in the UFC, man. Kevin has incredible striking, very underestimated grappling, and very underestimated wrestling, man. And, going into this fight, we were talking about, he might be on the chopping block if he loses to Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson coming into this fight, 10 wins, 5 losses in the UFC since 2012, and he was on a 2-fight win streak. When you look at Kevin, on the other hand, he's had 1 win out of his last 6 bouts. Now, in the last 5 years, Kevin has fought 19 times in the UFC. He has taken short notice fight after short notice fight. He's filled in matchups that the UFC was going to lose, but Kevin Holland has always found a way to step up and show up. So I think the UFC is giving him a little bit of leniency of keeping him around. But hey, you look at this fight, I didn't know Kevin Holland. I mean, I knew he was a good grappler, I knew he was a good wrestler, but you look at Gunnar Nelson, man, grappling is his specialty, and I wasn't sure if Gunnar was going to be able to keep him off his back. But man, look at that first round. What a beautiful 3-2 combination to land at the end of the first. Drop Gunnar Nelson. Kevin Holland almost gets the finish. Second round, Kevin keeping his range. I thought he looked great. Close round, but I gave it to Kevin. Then unfortunately in the third round, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but Gunnar Nelson finally got Kevin down, had him in a side choke, but Kevin, showing his grappling durability and his toughness, staying out of that, answering the phone technique to stay out, but I mean, that's still uncomfortable. Then uses the fence, walks up, back rolls, and gets the fight, gets out of the submission, man. It was just a spectacular fight. It was great to see Kevin get back into the win column. I'm a big fan of Kevin, as I've talked about on the show. I think he's great on the mic. I think he's great in the ring, and I think he's a great fighter to look up to. He's a no-bullshit kind of fighter. Anytime, any place, anywhere. And if you can't respect someone like that in the UFC, you're not a true fan, man. And, in the post-fight, interview, Kevin Holland did what Kevin Holland does, is ran his mouth, and he said, man, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was along the lines of, I am the best gatekeeper the UFC has ever seen. And I tell you what, Kevin, you are absolutely right, man. You're an incredible fighter, and, unfortunately, I don't think Kevin Holland is champion caliber fighter, but man, what an incredible gatekeeper he is. Every time Kevin Holland tunes in, or every time Kevin Holland fights, I'm going to be tuning in.